I'm James Gardner, host of Your History, Your Story, a podcast for everybody who loves stories about interesting people and events told by those who uncovered them from within their own family trees. This, we hope, will inspire you to discover and celebrate your history and your story. Welcome to Your History, Your Story. We love hearing from our listeners, and today we're excited to introduce you to one of our listeners, Aly Riley, a budding historian with a passion for uncovering the lesser-known stories of the American Revolutionary War. Aly has been fascinated with history since childhood, and her dedication led her to self-publish her first book, Spies, a captivating look at the women whose espionage helped America gain its independence from Great Britain. In this special listener appreciation episode, we'll chat with Aly about her journey and her passion for inspiring others, especially younger generations, to explore history and discover the fascinating stories hidden within their own family trees. Aly's enthusiasm is sure to inspire, and we hope to connect with more young historians like Aly in the future. I'd now like to welcome Aly Riley to our show. Welcome, Aly.
Thank you for having me, James.
Well, it's a pleasure. So I'm going to start off by having you turn back the clock to when you're younger. And how did you develop an interest in history?
You know, it was mainly from my mother's mother. My grandmother loved history. She used to travel a lot when she was younger with my grandfather, and she reads a lot of the old time books, and she always tried to get us into that. My brother wasn't too much into it, but me, she helped raise me when my mother would work, and she would always have Jeopardy on for us. So she would, every time she saw a history question pop up, she was like, I think you can get into this. I think you would like it. She said I would perk up every time I heard that word. And, she said instead of normal kids' books, I would get history books.
There was something about it that just sort of drew you in, right?
Yeah.
What is it about the history questions or the stories about history? What is it that drew you in, do you think?
I think it all really actually started when I was about 10 years old. We went to Philadelphia and I got to see the Betsy Ross house. We saw the Liberty Bell, Independence Hall. And I was like, for the first 10 years of my life, I actually was kind of iffy on it. I'm like, why do people like this? It's weird. Now I see why. There's so many amazing stories about history, especially in America. And I loved it. And I kept begging my mom ever since, let's go to museums, let's do this, let's do that. And she was like, if that's your thing, that's your thing. Let's do it. And I've been hooked ever since. And now I'm 30. So I've been involved there 20 years.
Yeah. Now with me, I know that when I was a little kid, what used to draw me in was standing someplace now where something very important happened many, many, many years ago. There's something about standing in a place like Independence
Yes.
Hall. Was that the same with you?
The funny thing is, we actually live around the corner from where the Hindenburg crashed.
You do?
I do. We live 5 minutes away from Lakehurst Naval Base. So in 2017, we got to actually walk there. They did a big 80th anniversary thing. And I was like, this is just weird knowing we live 5 minutes away. We can still hear them practicing military. We can actually hear it from our house.
That's a place that I've been meaning to go see, but I wasn't sure. It's an active base
It
still,
is.
but you're able to go visit and see where it happened. Is that going on
They
today?
they do plan some events that you are able to go. I think you have to wait till they post it on social media from when you're allowing it. But I saw it on social media in 2017. I said to my mom, we're 5 minutes away. We gotta go. So I'm very intrigued in 3 years what they're gonna do for the 90th.
Yeah. Can you imagine if you had been there and seen that happen? Uh,
Yeah. Oh gosh, I know. I mean, I see all the videos of it, and I'm just like, to think we stood there, it's amazing to me to think we were right there.
I think I'm going to try to find out if there's any events coming up that I could go see it. I remember my dad, I think he was a teenager or so when that happened. I remember him
Yeah.
telling me about it. That and the other thing was you've heard the story of the Orson Welles broadcast about War of the Worlds on the
Right.
radio. He remembered that too. But that's so cool. So you've got this deep interest in history as a kid, and it's growing, and you love to actually visit places and read about it and answer questions on Jeopardy. So how have you chosen to pursue your interest in history and apply it?
Well, throughout my whole schooling years, I loved history. I loved taking courses. I always had great teachers. And then I got my associates in liberal arts from Ocean County College in Toms River. But then I decided to take a little break. I don't really remember why, and decided to go a different path. And I did sports journalism for about 3 years. And I did communications at Keene University. I had my bachelor's in that. And there was a book, actually. This is like what kind of brought all back to me full circle with my grandmother. My grandmother was in a nursing home, and they had like this big table of all books that residents and families could read. And when I went to go visit her, she had 1776 by David McCullough.
Mm.
And she was like, you know what? Reread this. I know how much you loved it. She said, you remember the stories when you grew up. And I was reading it and I was like, you know what? I still had good grades from history classes I had to take at the other classes. I was like, you know what? Maybe she's right. And then I applied to Monmouth. I got in, and now I have my master's in history from Monmouth University.
Oh, that is so cool. Yeah, that's 1776. David McCullough. I don't know about you, but he is my favorite author.
Yeah, he has some good books. I do have a few in my bookcase.
Yeah, I was so saddened when he passed away
Yeah,
a little while ago, and the book 1776, really, you feel like you're part of the history while it's
yeah,
rolling out, particularly being from the New York area. A lot of it centers in this New York, New Jersey area, but
right.
also his book, John Adams, the biography of John Adams, was
Yes.
fantastic. So you got a master's in history. Was there any particular area of focus in your master's?
I do mainly the colonial era. So I go from my specialties are Jamestown to the end of the Civil War, but I focus on the American Revolution and the nation's founding. That's really what I love the most.
Yeah, that's always been a big interest of mine. Have you ever been to Washington's headquarters in Morristown, New Jersey?
There's a funny story about that. My mother and I tried and we got lost. We tried. My mother and I tried after I got enrolled in Monmouth, and after my very first semester, I did a course on American Revolution. And my professor there, he does a lot of stuff with the New Jersey parks. And my mom said, well, let's drive up there one weekend. We got nothing to do. We got lost. Like as we were driving through, she said, well, there's a little building that probably the soldiers were in. She goes, where's the big one? We could not find it. And she goes, I'm not driving here for 3 hours. And we pulled away. We couldn't find it. We were looking for the big white building. We couldn't find it.
Yeah, it's actually I think called the Ford Mansion, which is where Washington stayed. And then right just down south on 287 is Jockey Hollow, which is where the
Right.
soldiers were encamped. So, hey, if you get a chance to come this way again, please give it another shot. It'll be well worth your trip. And one thing I did want to mention at Washington's headquarters, there's a museum. The section of the museum is for children. It's very interactive sort of a thing, which is good because I know you're a fan of kids learning history as well.
Yeah. I'm an aunt to 10-year-old twins, and I'm really trying to get them into it. My nephew's hit and miss, but like my niece, like, she's got like psychic hearing. Like every time I mention something to my mom, she turns to me and she goes, well, I want to talk about it. I'm like, okay. But you can't mention Washington in front of my mother because we have a story that she ticked off his ghost at Mount Vernon.
Oh,
Yeah. You cannot mention George Washington in front of my mother.
don't get that ghost mad.
Nope, she did. Because she walked in the mansion, past the living room, nearly faints. She steps outside, comes back in, happens again. I said, just go sit outside. So I was like, so like now that's our running joke saying every time you mention him, I said, you ticked off his ghost.
That's
Just leave it at that.
a little tough for you since that's your favorite area of history is
I
the
know.
revolution.
And that's like every time, because like I said, like last week, he actually shares his birthday with my sister-in-law. I said, it's free admission. She goes, you can go by yourself. Take a bus. That's always her answer. I was like, but I said, it's fun. She goes, not for me. It wasn't.
Yeah. So, Ali, so American Revolution. And then you really zeroed in on a particular part of the American Revolution, and you've actually written about it. And you talked about female spies during
Yes.
the Revolution. Can you give us a little bit about that?
Right. So I wrote a book called She Spies, and it was loosely based on the one course I did at Monmouth. It was called American Revolution. And my professor said, for your final project, do anything you want on your paper. He said, I don't care as long as it pertains from like the Stamp Act to Washington's death. I don't care what you do. So I looked up in one of the books that we had to read, I saw something called The Culper Spying. I said, well, and then when I saw it was on Long Island, where my dad's family's from, I'm like, okay, maybe I was meant to do this. And I saw the name of a female spy named Anna Strong. She lived in Setauket. We know where that is. And then I looked up more about it. I said, I wonder if there were more. And then when I saw that there were more female spies, there was Lydia Dara in Philly, Peggy Shippen, Ann Bates at White Plains. I'm like, why was none of this ever talked about? All my years, 20 years of studying this, I never knew about these women. Why? And I said, if it wasn't for them, I said, look what they did. Look how they helped win the war with what the activities they performed. So I said, you know what? I'm going to make this a thesis and then I'm going to make it a book because if I don't tell these stories, who will?
Well, you have written a book. It's called She Spies, and definitely very interesting stuff. Now, when you completed your thesis, did you say to yourself, I want to make history my career. I want to keep writing. Was writing that thesis sort of the bug that bit you to keep writing, or is there something else you want to do in conjunction, like teaching or inspiring other people?
I definitely want to keep writing, keep telling stories that are really unknown because I think, the more that it's out there, I think the more people will be amazed that there was other stuff that we were never taught, we never learned about. I mean, with this thesis, I said, I can't believe that all these women did what they did and it was never talked about.
Well, uncovering new things, that's something I want to commiserate with you as a fellow history buff. Have you ever had people say to you, why do you want to study something that's already happened?
Oh,
Like,
yeah,
there's nothing new. It's all been written about. Who cares? I mean, you've probably heard that too, but
many times.
how do you feel about that when you hear that?
I say, if you don't learn about how our nation came to be what it is, there's so many important stories. There's women's history, there's Black history. There's so much that has to be told, that should be told. And there's like say with my thesis and my book, there's hidden histories nobody knows about. If I had never gone further to look up more about Anna Strong and female spies, I probably would have never known any of this existed. And for 20 years, I didn't know it existed. I've been involved with history since I was 10, and to not know any of this happened, I'm like, where was this hiding? And I said, I'm digging it out. I'm writing the book. I'm putting it out there. So like, yeah,
Well,
I've been told that like, they're all dead. Why do you care? Like, it already happened. And I was like, this book is the reason why, because I didn't know about this. And now so many people do because of me.
that
There's
is
hidden histories nobody knows about.
Yep, that is terrific. Because even here now, you see people coming out with biographies on people, and you think, oh, well, I'm sure they've been written about. But the thing is that some biographies haven't been written on a person maybe for 50, 60, 70 years sometimes. And yet, there's more access to information now. As a researcher, I would
Right.
imagine, there's a lot more available now than there was, say 50 years ago.
Right.
You had to get in your car and drive all over. Now, sometimes you have
Oh
to
yeah.
do that, right?
Yeah.
But there's a lot more online. So more fresh stuff can come out of old manuscripts that are recently discovered or declassified or whatever it is. So really kudos to you for carrying the torch for us history lovers and finding
Yeah.
new things and about the she spies of the revolution. So that's really cool. Now, you mentioned about your grandma a few times. I know she's very important to you,
Of course.
and I want to ask you about, well, let me start by saying, so our podcast is called Your History, Your Story. So it's about storytelling.
Yeah.
And you talked about your grandma. Did you pursue in depth at all any study of your own family history? And if so, what kind of cool things came out of that?
Well, one of my mostly my favorite thing was we never really talked about it until my grandmother died, but I find out that my papa, my mother's father, was the bartender to the mob.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, you better get those drinks right.
Oh yeah. He knew like they loved him. And I'm like, it's weird knowing in an unconventional way you're kind of like the granddaughter to it all, but I embrace it. I we talk about Papa all the time, and the Mob Museum actually just posted on Instagram about this one mobster that was in the Newark, New Jersey, and I'm like, oh my God, Papa knew him. This is scaring me, but he knew him, and it's just weird because he hated seeing people drink, which is kind of weird considering that. But I was like, and my mom was like, "How do you think we afforded to go to Seaside every summer? The tips. They liked him. They loved him."
I like that. You either got a great tip or you ended up in the trunk of a car.
Yeah, because I remember my mother said that they wanted like prostitutes and other stuff in the bar, and Papa was like, "No." He goes, "I don't like that stuff," and I'm like, "You don't tell them no. Doesn't he know that's like the unwritten rule? You don't tell them no." And she said, "Well, he did. They didn't get mad, but they bought out the bar." And
Wow.
then he went on to another one for the last 19 years of his life.
Isn't
I
that
was like,
interesting?
it's weird, but I embrace it.
Of course. Hey, look, in history, you got some good people, you got some bad people, but there's a lot more of people who have good stuff and bad stuff in their
Yeah.
history, right? And I think that's one of the things we have to look at history that way, that nobody's perfect, and some people, maybe the balance is one way or another with some people, but largely many people, historical figures and just ordinary people, they've got a story, and in that story is some bad decisions, good decisions, and
Yeah.
a lot in between. So you did
Yeah.
this research. What would you say to some young person, a high school or college age person who is interested in either studying history and or learning more about their own family tree, so history in general, or learning more about their family tree, but maybe they don't think they have enough time, maybe they're not sure what they would do with their degree. What kind of advice would you give to inspire them to pursue the type of interest that you have in history?
I was using the Ancestry app a lot. That really helped me. I was like looking it up, and I had like, my mother's information, my father. I had both my grandparents, both my great grandparents' information. And it's just amazing the stuff that comes out that, like, you didn't even know, like, there's like family members you didn't even remember that you had or you didn't know. So it's really a fun thing to do. I mean, I didn't know about the whole mafia thing until my mother told me. I mean, there are things that like pop up in this thing that, or like there are photos on there of Papa that I never even saw before. So it's amazing what this ancestry can do. I mean, I think it's fun to do. And like, now I'm getting my 10-year-old niece into it. And she was like, "Oh, like, he does look like grandma." I said, "I know he does." I said, "That was her father. Of course he does." I said, "That was your great great grandfather."
Yeah. Would you say that's kind of a like studying history in your family could be something that somebody who doesn't maybe like to study it in school might enjoy, like maybe into science and technology and all that stuff, like great stuff, of course. And somebody says, James, guess what I found out about our grandfather or whatever? Isn't this cool? Do you think really that could make somebody become a history lover because they're interested in their own
Oh,
family story?
I think so too. I mean, you never know what's going to pop up on these ancestry things. I mean, I even found like way back, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but like my six times great grandfather was in the war.
The revolution?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Do
And
you
some of like the graves pop up. Like there was a woman named Emma. She looks so identical to my father's sister. And my mom was like, "Who's who?" Like I can't even tell the difference. That's how much she looks like her. And she goes, "Oh my God, she looks like your aunt." I said, "I know."
wow,
So like
was
you
this
never know what's going to
person
come up.
no, you never know. Was this the person whose picture was this like a painting? Was it a Revolutionary War era or was it more recent?
The Emma person was more recent.
Okay.
I would say
All right.
that one was like maybe mid 1910s.
Okay.
But I was
Okay.
just like, you never know what you're gonna find on these things, and I think it would pique people's interest, like, you look up your history and you say, "Oh my god, my father fought in this my 6 times great-grandfather was in the American Revolution," or this one say, "March with Harriet Tubman," like, you don't know.
You don't
You
know. And
you
then what
never
happens
know.
is, no, you never know when and then when you find out that this relative was part of this or they lived here or wherever, I think it encourages people to learn more about that era or that war or
Yeah.
that event. So it sort of points people towards history in general. Are there any other words of encouragement that you would give for somebody who maybe is considering pursuing an academic degree in history like you did?
I would just say if you have a story that has to be told, if you love history, go for it. I mean, I was shy at first. I really was like, I didn't think I was going to do well in graduate school, even though my whole life I got great grades in history. But if you love, my mom always told me, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life.
Mm, good.
She's always taught me that. And I said, I love what I'm doing. I love promoting this book. I loved writing this book, writing the thesis on it. And you could have like a family story or your own story you want to tell and just
Very
get
true.
it out there.
Great, great advice. So let me conclude by asking you, Aly, what are your plans for the future with regard to your love of history and expressing that love?
Well, with She Spies right now, I am working with a great professional that I met on LinkedIn, and we are trying to turn She Spies into a documentary.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Yes. But I'm thinking maybe my second book will be about Papa and talking about mob life and knowing them, his early life, just what a great person he was. And then there's more stories I want to tell, more unknown stories I want to try to find that haven't been told.
Oh, that's great. Very exciting. And I want to thank you for being a guest on our show because we connected and I saw that you're a young person and you're very excited about history.
Yes.
And that's what, we're about storytelling. You're very contagious, your excitement
Thank
for
you.
history. So if I could give you some advice as a much older history
Mm,
lover, keep being an evangelist for history because, a lot of people think of it as dry and boring and
yeah.
they just don't read about it or they don't want to know about it. Just keep doing what you're doing. Tell people, just show them through your own enthusiasm,
Yeah.
which is what you're doing. Keep me posted
I
on
will.
your, if you can get that documentary out there, that'd be great.
Yeah. I mean, I'm working with a pitch deck professional right now, and she knows someone who can help with funding. She knows a producer who wants to possibly get on.
All right. Thank you for being on our show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and best of luck with your book, She Spies, and also your future books. I can't wait to read about your grandpa. How cool. But Aly, thank you so much for being a guest on our show, and we wish you the very best in your future endeavors.
Thank you so much.
Okay, have a good one.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Your History, Your Story. You can connect with us on Facebook and YouTube at Your History, Your Story, or on Instagram and Twitter at YHYS Podcast. We'd love to hear from you if you have any questions, comments, or a story to tell. Be well and God bless.